Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Senate candidate Marquita Bradshaw tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us as we continue to do the show remotely. We are joined tonight by Democratic candidate for Senate, Marquita Bradshaw. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. And let me say up top, we will also be reaching out to the Republican candidate for Senate, Bill Hagerty. We hope to have him on the show as well to keep things balanced. Both Ms. Bradshaw and Mr. Hagerty are running for the seat being vacated by longtime Republican Senator, the former governor, Lamar Alexander. We'll start with just the basics. What are the issues that are most important to you that made you run for the Democratic position, and why do you think your issues are more important than those being put forward by Mr. Hagerty?
Well, what makes my issues more important is that they're just not my issues. The platform that we have put together is a people's platform, which has been informed by listening to voters. My name is Marquita Bradshaw, and I am a Democratic nominee for United States Senate. The issues that people are most concerned about in the state of Tennessee is healthcare, the environment, the economy, and education. And all of those things are intertwined together.
In your background, you kind of came out of nowhere for some people, not for all people, but James Mackler was the Nashville-based candidate. You raised almost $2 million. You had raised quite a bit less than that. So your background that leads you to, one, view those as the most important issues, and why your background makes you the person who can best execute on those issues.
Okay, first of all, I didn't come out of anywhere. We've been working since last year along with the other candidates that were in the race that ran an honorable race. On election day, we had raised $27,480 by election day. But still, it was the people power campaign that we put together of volunteers across the state that was able to secure the win. We've always had, in my background, whether as a community organizer in my neighborhood or even working for nonprofits or a labor union, we've always been up against big money. People have. And so this is all about putting together a people-powered platform where the narratives of what people are experiencing in the state of Tennessee are shaping the policy. So every sentence that you see on the policy and the policy platforms on marquitabradshaw.com, it can connect with someone's personal story across Tennessee. And those stories is the data that drives the empirical data that we need to inform policy to be able to work on when I get to DC, when the voters elect me.
Let me bring in Bill Dries. Bill?
Ms. Bradshaw, as you may know, Tennessee is considered to be a red or a majority Republican state. What did you see in your connections and your travels across the state during this campaign that you think may suggest something other than that in Tennessee?
Well, Tennessee is a people power state. It's not neither Republican nor Democrat. And we have a lot of apathy, people who have lost faith in the process. The Republican faction is only a small, minute part of the whole demographics of voters. We almost have 5 million people who are registered, that are eligible to register to vote. And that is not true. We do not have a red state. We have a state that has people have lost faith and stopped participating in the process. And by having a candidate that actually experienced the issues of everyday working people, that's what changed the narrative for the primary, and that's what's going to change the narrative for the general. Viability looks different when hardworking people pull together and put forth a platform that represents the issues and the truth of what people are experiencing in the state of Tennessee.
Right. Your work on environmental causes comes at a time when more and more organizers and people considered to be activists around issues have started to get involved in what I would call retail politics, actually running for office. Is that a mix that requires some adjustment to someone who's used to dealing with issues and building coalitions around them?
Well, my whole career has been about building coalitions and empowering people with the tools to hold their government accountable and transparent when it comes to enforcement of policy and making sure that it's equitable and fair. And so it's not a transition for me. It's what I've been doing for 25 years. And that's what's going to take us to the finish line. It's all about people's voices. It's about telling the truth what's going on in Tennessee. Right now, we're experiencing a pandemic. And before there was a pandemic, people were struggling when it came to the economy. We didn't have a fair educational system. And when it came to the environment, we were not where we needed to be and transitioning away from pollution. And right now, those are core American issues. Those are neither Democrat, Republican, socialist, or libertarian. It's an American core principle. And that's what's building this momentum and this movement that's happening all across the state of Tennessee. If you look at the primary, you even see some people who voted Democrat for the first time, they were Republicans, because the leaders have gotten so far partisan that they've stopped focusing on issues that people are actually experiencing. And we have too many internal threats right now. We have the internal threat of racism, and we have the internal threat of poverty, and we have to get to the other side of this pandemic.
Tennessee is sometimes referred to as a state with three grand divisions. In moving across the state, and you posted some very impressive totals, not only in Memphis, but also in Nashville, in Chattanooga, in Knoxville as well, in the Democratic primary. What did you see that suggests to you kind of the political makeup of the state? Are we different from one region to another? Are there priorities in one part of the state that may be different from another part of the state?
The one thing is true is that if you take what happened in my community in South Memphis about the loss of manufacturing jobs, how small businesses that were once thriving disappeared, and how the educational system is not equitable. If you take South Memphis out of it, it can fit any town in rural Tennessee, where people don't have access to medical care, and which should include mental health services and wraparound services for people to get over addiction. And so if you look at what people need across the state of Tennessee and a lack of hospitals, it's the same thing that's happening all across the state. People want better. They want their concerns addressed, and they want solutions. And they're tired of people playing politics with their paychecks and politics with their lives, because bad policies eventually kill people.
You've been involved. We should say you referred to South Memphis. You've been involved specifically in what longtime Memphians refer to as the Defense Depot area. Talk a little bit about your involvement in what has happened there and the transition of the community.
The Defense Depot was a military landfill that stored chemicals that were made to kill people and plants very effectively. It was right across the street from my elementary school. And what we have worked on as a family and as a community is to cause awareness and look for transparency and accountability when it comes to environmental laws. We have to take a step back. what brought me into politics was environmental racism. There are 1,100 Superfund sites across the state of Tennessee, whether they are active, national priority lists, or archived. And just because it's archived doesn't mean that it's been cleaned up or remediated. It just means that it's on a lesser priority than all the other sites.
Mm-hmm.
How does 220 of those Superfund sites end up in Memphis, Tennessee? That's what environmental racism looks like. It reflects that pollution is in communities of people of color, Black, brown, indigenous, and poor whites, more so often than affluent people who are connected to politicians.
All right. Eric, over to you.
Yeah, a couple of things. Again, and for those maybe who have joined us late, we will be extending an invitation to Bill Hagerty, who is the Republican candidate for Senate, and hope to have him on very soon. I would imagine some people listening would say, when you talk about the environment, it is often framed as jobs versus the environment, right? That well, if you want to spend money cleaning up or you want to put environmental restrictions, some people will say that's going to diminish job creation. It's going to make Tennessee a less competitive state for new jobs and factories. How do you approach that balance between economic activity and environmental protection?
Where eventually economic activity will come to a halt if you have a very sickly population, where your workforce doesn't have clean air, clean water, and clean soil, because environmental health is connected to people's health, number one and foremost. And Republicans and Democrats understand that very well. There is no pit against jobs. It's about transforming and going towards a system where we are transitioning away from more polluted industries and going to more renewable industries, which creates more jobs, higher paying jobs, and also creates safe and healthy communities by ensuring that our water infrastructure is updated, our sewage infrastructure is updated, our electrical system is updated, our broadband is expanded across the state of Tennessee, our roads and bridges are updated. When you talk about the Green New Deal, it is a stimulus to our economy because it's the investments to put people to work, where many people are hurting all across Tennessee right now, needing jobs.
You talked about the issue of healthcare and across the state. How would you deliver, if you were elected to the Senate, how would you deliver more healthcare to more people? Would that be through an expansion of the Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, Medicaid expansion that Tennessee never opted into, or some other method? What would be your approach?
Right now, we know healthcare is not working because in a pandemic, we all understand that all of our neighbors need access to healthcare with a primary care physician that's patient-centered, that follows the health outcomes. And so, yes, expanding that until we get to the point where we have Medicare for all. And that's the only way that we can keep our communities healthy and safe, is that everyone has access and they can actually go to the doctor without being afraid of having to file bankruptcy like I did myself because of medical bills. It's time out for that. We can move into a place where everyone can have health care and that will have the hospitals in place that communities need. Right now, you see it's not working. We have so many counties. I think I drove through 15 counties and they did not have not one healthcare facility. That's unacceptable. We can do better.
Sorry to interrupt, sorry with the delay. But can it be paid for? How would that be paid for?
We pay for things collectively in this country. And that means that we have to put our priorities where our values are, right? Nobody ever asks, how do we pay for our military? Do we? And so it's certain things when it comes to healthcare, that should be a priority. When it comes to education, it should be a priority. And when it comes to the environment, it should be a priority, because it's all about the health and safety of our country so we can move towards the ingenuity and creativity that all of us deserves.
You mentioned, one more question, I'll go back to Bill, but you mentioned environmental racism, and obviously the country is in the middle of a major conversation, protests, sadness, I mean, a whole range of emotions and actions around violence between police and people. And there was a shooting in Memphis that's still not clear what happened just this week. Obviously in Wisconsin, just terrible things happening up there. What, as a senator, could you do if you were to win to address the issues that people are protesting about?
Well, just so you understand that people are not just protesting about how racism is laced through our criminal justice system. They're protesting about how racism is interlaced in every part of the American fabric. We have to tell the truth in order to address how to move forward and lay racism to bed. One thing that you can do as a United States Senator is create policies with punitive measures for when racism is in policies. We have to remove those out, and we have to create punitive measures so we can actually move behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes from that systematic racism. And so policy happen overnight, and those behavior, attitudes, and beliefs will change.
Let me go to Bill on that.
All right. Let's talk about the Tennessee Valley Authority. It's been in the news on several fronts here in Memphis. Memphis Light, Gas, and Water is in the process of determining whether the utility should stay with or leave the Tennessee Valley Authority. President Trump has talked about changing some board members and says he wants the CEO of the TVA to go out. There's also been a much longer discussion that I believe you've been a part of about the use of renewables as a power source for the Tennessee Valley Authority. Let's talk about the renewables first. Is TVA doing everything that it should do as a federal agency to promote the use of renewable sources of energy?
So there's renewable sources of energy, and then there's clean renewable sources of energy. Those are two different things, right? Mm-hmm. Because just because it's renewable don't mean that it's good for the health and safety of people. However, this is the opportunity to have those conversations, to hold TVA accountable and make sure that we as Memphians get the services that we need and also deserve in moving towards clean renewable energy. This is an opportunity to have those negotiations, to look at the proposals, look for transparency and accountability, and to ensure that we address the energy burden that people are experiencing right now. I think after today, over 30,000 people will probably be without power in Memphis, Tennessee, because of the energy burden, experiencing a pandemic. That right there is immoral.
Should Memphis Light, Gas, and Water stay with TVA or leave TVA?
This is the opportunity for us to figure out as citizens what's best for us. And we have to look at those proposals, and we have to be informed about what's best for Memphians, because it's a lot at stake to be trapped in a contract that does not actually reflect clean renewable energy. So we have to negotiate that right now.
Mm-hmm. And the president's irritation at the TVA board was over a decision that the board made and that the administration of TVA made to outsource the hiring of some tech workers, and that was what he stated was why he ousted two of the board members. What do you think about that?
I have to have more information to come in on it.
All right. Okay. So the views of you and Bill Hagerty, the Republican nominee, represent a pretty stark difference. He has talked about a more decisive federal reaction to the protest that we have seen. How do you think voters go about deciding which one of you should be in the United States Senate?
Voters are going to decide by who listens to them and who actually implements those voices into policy. And that's how we're going to secure the general in November.
Mm-hmm. All right. Eric?
Let me switch to the other, major issue that hangs over all of this, which is coronavirus and the response of the federal government. What is your assessment of that, the response so far by the federal government, both to the pandemic and on the medical side, but also the economic impact that it's having and the federal response there?
So our focus from the federal government has been to stabilize the wealthy first, right? They say Wall Street 3 times within 48 hours. However, they can't get it right when it comes to people. We have to stabilize people first before Wall Street, because without people, Wall Street won't exist.
And so what could the federal government do that is more focused on people in your mind?
We have to make sure that there are stimulus in place to sustain people and small businesses until we get to the other side of the pandemic, in order for the communities and people to thrive. Because if we lose the bottom out of our economic system of small businesses, that is a dire circumstances that nobody wants to face. That means our communities are going to look drastically different. And we cannot afford that as Americans at all, to lose more small businesses where they were already struggling, and for more people to get unstabilized, losing housing and resources during the pandemic, when everybody needs those things in order to stay safe and healthy.
In terms of health, what more should stepping away from the economic side, but to the mitigation or elimination of the virus, letting us get out and being a TV studio, for instance, what should the federal government be doing to mitigate the impact of the virus?
We should have widespread testing. You have to understand the problem completely in order to put forth solutions. That's number one. You have to know your status, and everybody needs to know their status in order for them to know if it's healthy enough for them to even go to work. You got people who can't afford not to go to work right now. And so if they are sick, then there is continually spreading the virus. And so number one, we need to make sure that there's widespread testing. Number two, we need to make sure that people who are experiencing unemployment because of the pandemic keeps receiving support until we get to the other side of the pandemic to rebuild our economy, because we don't need to go back to what was normal before. We need to have better than normal.
Last question for me, and I'll go back to Bill. Do you worry about the deficit spending, the cost of the relief that's been given both to Wall Street and to individuals and to small businesses? I mean, is there a point in time where the U.S. is just spending too much money on this?
It's not about spending too much money. We have a regressive tax system where our wealthiest people are not putting into the pot. And so we have to actually put forth a progressive tax structure where it actually supports and balances our budget. So the reason that the deficit is the way it is because the wealthy keeps getting stuff out and they're not putting stuff back in.
Bill, a couple minutes here.
One of the jobs of senators and congressmen is to make sure that there's a fair share of federal funding for the areas that they represent. How do you think Tennessee does, and specifically Memphis, in terms of its share of federal funding out of Washington?
Well, I know that I'm going to fight for families of Tennessee, just like they're my family, and fight for those communities that's across Tennessee, just like in South Memphis. We need to make sure that we have the funding in order to stabilize the communities all across the state of Tennessee. Each region has something specific that needs to be addressed. Some of it is more broadband, and some of it's more hospitals, some of it's more jobs. I've been listening, and I know what my job will be when I'm elected to be the next United States Senator. The first time ever that a Black woman was served for the state of Tennessee.
The margin is pretty close in the Senate between Democrats and Republicans. Give me your prediction on how you think this is going to go nationally once the votes are counted in November.
You're going to see a lot of U.S. Senate seats flipped. And you're going to see Biden and Kamala as the next president and vice president.
Okay. If that doesn't happen in the Senate, but you are elected and go into a chamber that remains majority Republican, how do you find a way to get things done when the Republicans are in control of the body?
There are some Republicans that are sick of the partisan politics, and they want to move forward to make sure that we have American core values that represent the people that we serve. And so I have no problems under any scenario knowing that we will be able to get the work done for the state of Tennessee because we serve people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
For the general election campaign, have you set a fundraising goal, and have you heard from people who maybe weren't involved in your campaign during the primary?
The Democratic Party has done what they do. We go through the primary to decide who, and now everyone is supporting the U.S. Senate Democratic nominee across the state. And we have had over 800 people sign up to be volunteers since Election Day. You hear me? 800.
Mm-hmm.
We did our volunteer shifts that filled up within less than 24 hours for this week. We also raised almost $270,000 since Election Day. And we're not stopping there. All of those are hard-working dollars that's going to go a long way to make sure that we secure the United States General. We'll still use the same principles of grassroots organizing. We'll just have a lot more tools with the money that we're able to bring in.
All right. Well, we are out of time. Again, we will extend an invitation to the Republican candidate, Bill Hagerty, be on soon. Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can get past episodes of the show as a podcast on the Daily Memphian site or on the WKNO website. Thanks. Join us again next week.